Om Sarvadharmasthapakastam Sarvadharmaswarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnayate Namaha. We are studying the sixth chapter from Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, as the spiritual teacher, first part. And the heading of the chapter is the mood of the spiritual teacher and Mathurana. And in that, we have read in details about Mathur's character. And we need not read it again, we remember all those things. And the last point was very, very important, if you remember, that our life is the same as Avatara's life. Avatara's life is a prototype of our life. Things not seen so clearly in our life are seen clearly in their life. And so, when we introspectively find our history of our own life, it is an important point because we should never feel despondent in spiritual life. That is the main point. That we may see or not see, but it is God who is arranging our spiritual journey. And outside world, we may feel people are obstructing us or somebody is supporting us, but everything is happening in such a way that our spiritual life will progress. That was the main point. And this is seen very clearly in Sri Ramakrishna and all other incarnations also. So that was the main point. Now we come to the fifth paragraph of this chapter, in which Mathur's characters, some points are repeated again for our recapitulation. Though a devotee, Mathur was not foolish. Another point in Mathur's character needs a little analysis. When we are told of the manner in which he had more than 100% love and reverence for the Master, our minds clouded with doubts think at the very outset, the man must have been an absolute fool. Can a man otherwise have such love and reverence for another man? Had it been we would have defied Ramakrishna to generate by the strength of his character so much love and reverence in our hearts. This is our bragging, huh? As if it were a matter to be condemned to have love and reverence. That is our attitude. We are therefore trying here to state and explain to the reader exactly as much about Mathur as we heard from the Master, and can say that Mathur was not a man of an over-naive nature. Naive means too simpleton. He was not in any way less intelligent or suspicious than we. Intelligent and suspicious than we. He also was suspicious of the Master's character and actions, unintelligible to man. and did not spare himself in testing him at every step in the beginning. But of what avail was it? How could the Airavat of Mathur's skepticism withstand the force of the strong and furious current of the very powerful Mandakini of the master's unprecedented and unheard spiritual mood? This is an allegory. And there is a story given by the translator here. The metaphor is from the Hindu Purana. The story is, while Bhagirath was bringing down Ganga on earth, she got into a place in the Himalayas surrounded on all sides by rocks, which she failed to pierce through or overflow. In her plight, she asked Bhagirath to go to Indra's elephant Airavata and to request him to pierce the rock with his tusk to make an outlet for her. When Airavata was approached with the request, he made an indecent proposal in his vanity. When from the sad face of her child, for Bhagirath looked upon her as his mother, Ganga understood the matter. She sent him again to Airavat with a counter proposal that if he could withstand the strength of but 3 waves of hers, she would consent to his proposal. Airavata, blinded by his vanity, took his proposal to be already agreed upon, came and pierced the rock, but could not withstand the very first wave of Ganga and was carried off. And Ganga's name is Mandakini also, because here in the allegory Mandakini is mentioned. Actually, Mandakini is a tributary of Ganga. Alaknanda gets so many rivers and joins Bhagirathi in Devaprayag. There are 5 prayags in the Himalayas. Karnaprayag, Rudraprayag. They are all, Prayag means Ganga joining with somebody. And they are all prayags on Alaknanda. And Alaknanda and Bhagirathi join in Devaprayag. And then she is able to break the rocks. That is the another legend there. But in between the Airavat story has come. So Airavat broke the rock and Ganga flowed through. That other thing we need not consider indecent proposal. He must have said, you marry me. She said, I agree if you can bear my force. Because she knew her force. Breaking the rock is not her business. That is Airavat has to do. But the force of current, Airavat cannot stand. So Airavat is Indra's elephant, big elephant. And yet, so Mathur's doubt and suspicions are compared to Airavat. And Thakur's flow of spirituality is the Ganges. Now Mathur's place in Thakur's life is such that Mathur helped him in every way. But Mathur had suspicion. How many times he tested Thakur, you know that? No. 2 main points are about his absolute brahmacharya. Mathur, in good faith, thought that due to excessive brahmacharya, something has happened to his brain. So once he introduced the best or worst prostitute in Thakur's room when Thakur was not present in the room. And when he came back and saw her, he said, Ma, Ma, Ma. And she also felt as if she is the mother. Second time he took Thakur without telling me where he is going and pushed him in a room full of prostitutes. And there also Thakur addressed all of them as Ma. And all of them felt Thakur is our child. So his force, his Airavat cannot stand Thakur's force. And he put Thakur under treatment for madness. But there one great Ayurveda physician told that it is not madness. Anyway, so he says that Mathur was not less suspicious than we are. But what can you do? How could the Airavata of Mathur skepticism withstand the force of the strong and furious current of the very powerful Mandakini of the master's unprecedented and unheard of spiritual? Previously, we have never seen such spirituality in anyone. We have never heard of such spirituality in anyone. With knowledge for its roar and divine love for its eddies. So in that force, two main currents are there, knowledge and devotion, divine love. The animal shook, Airavat, slipped, was crushed and defeated, turned over and carried off to an unknown destination. That is what happened to Airavat. So was Mathur's skepticism rendered useless. Completely defeated, Mathur had to take refuge at his holy feet wholeheartedly. It will not therefore take long to understand that we are describing the master's mood of the spiritual teacher, though we are speaking of Mathur. Mathur's first attraction toward the master, its cause and gradual development. So now gradual. Mathur was attracted toward the master at the very first sight on account of his straightforwardness like that of a boy, his sweet nature and good looks. These good looks are a result of the inner spirituality of. But that was the point of Mathur's attraction. Afterwards, during the first stage of sadhana, the state of the divine madness began to come on the master, and he sometimes lost control over himself. Lost control over himself not in enjoyment, in spirituality. Opposite. While he was worshipping the Universal Mother, he was beside himself with joy at the vision of her within his heart and worshipped himself. That is very unprecedented and unusual. Then on account of the force of this, and that is actual spirituality, to feel everything in your own heart. Then on account of the force of the strong current of the love of God, he overstepped the limits of ceremonial devotion and became an object of opprobrium and suspicion to the people of the temple for performing in his daily life various acts of great devotion in a way contrary to scriptural injunction and having no meaning in the public eye. So what we read in the Shastras, Karma Shastras, is the Vaidhi Bhakti. Bhakti depending upon certain rules. But those rules are meant to generate love in us. And then the appearance of bhakti changes totally. And that was happening in Thakur very quickly. So people will think it is madness or wrong something, criticize. They will. The keen intelligence and the sense of justice in Mathur, a man of the world, suggested immediately, nothing against him shall be entertained without seeing things with my own eyes. For I knew him to be a beautiful and straightforward nature at the first sight. So his intelligence was much keener, spiritual receptivity, I would say. than the ordinary one of life. That is why Mathur came secretly to the Kali temple, observed all his actions minutely, and as a result came to the conclusion, young Gadadhar is a living embodiment of divine love and straightforwardness. On account of the excess of devotion and faith, he is acting thus. This is why Mathur, an intelligent man of the world, tried to convince him thus. It is good to do what suits one, if only it can last. That means emotional outbursts are not permanent. They come as a wave and go away. We see in the common man. So you should do that only in which you can persist. You will not be able to persist in this. It is good to have faith and devotion, but will it do to be completely overwhelmed? I'll tell you some funny story. Yeah? One of my elder cousins or anybody, when the thought of leaving the house and becoming sadhu was in my mind, and he was supposed to be a religious man. So he's telling me, bhakti is all right, but we should not have excess of bhakti. And he quoted a shloka. You know one famous shloka? अति त्यागी हता कर्णा अति दर्पेण रावण अति रूपवती सीता अति सर्वत्र वर्जये. Three examples. Karna was too tyagi, so he was killed. Ravana had too much pride, so he was killed. Sita was too much beautiful, so she came into trouble. So we should avoid ati in all respects. I told him, you apply the shloka on the ati itself. Understood? Ati should not be done to this shloka. Everywhere this shloka will not do. In bhakti there is no ati. So this shloka is all right, but don't apply it on the bhakti. Anyway, so this is what the people think. And he was thought to be a very religious man. You cannot be but an object of condemnation to others for this. Moreover, there is a chance that you might lose your wits and become mad if you behave as you like without paying heed to what people say. That is what people, due to attachment, something become mad like that only. In the beginning, people will tell you, don't do, but you will not agree. Mad people don't want to believe they are mad. They will say you are mad. But although he tried to persuade him in this way, the feeling of devotion lying dormant within Mathur became awakened by virtue of good company. Devotion was there in Mathur. So by Thakur's company, he came up. And sometimes he would suddenly exclaim, but this kind of behavior as of mad people issuing from intense devotional feelings has been heard of in the case of Ram Prasad and of other sadhakas. May not the similar behavior and condition of Sri Ramakrishna also be of that nature? Therefore, instead of placing any obstacles in the way of the master, Mathur decided to go on observing how all this would take shape and to take the proper step at the proper time. Such behavior on the part of an employer, expert in worldly matters, towards a petty employee is an indication of not a little patience. You look at it from the worldly point of view. Mathur is practically the employee. He is employed and behavior towards an employee. The change of Mathur was due to the infectious power of devotion. Just like disease, devotion has the infectious power. Devotion has a catching power. We see daily that like physical changes, mental moods also are contagious. He gives a general example. For it is no longer necessary to refer to the experiences of the Vedic seers to prove, for modern science has all but proved it now, that the entire universe, both gross and subtle, is made up of modifications of one substance and is governed by the same laws. Science thinks of it as matter or material, and we think it is the Atman or mind universal. Is it therefore surprising that the modification called devotion, when awakened in one person, will awaken a similar mood lying dormant in another? You know some examples from science? Resonance. Now there is a wire with a particular tension, and we want to know what is the frequency. How do we know? We have a tongue, known frequency. Several tongues are there. And on the wire, we keep a small paper bit and we hit the tongue to the table or something and take it near. That piece will jump off. That means if the frequency of the wire is same as that of the tongue, then the wire will vibrate. That is called resonance. Another thing is that a tube is filled with water. And if you put the tongue over it, the water will dance. The frequency matches. In our house, when radio was first brought, a cabinet was made and radio was placed there. Sometimes the whole cabinet shakes. You have heard that everywhere. So there is a phenomena called resonance. In this way, all the bodies and all the minds of the world are joined. And that is why if the man should have some seed of bhakti and another has a strong bhakti, then that will influence. That is the theory. This is why the scriptures have declared so earnestly that the company of spiritual men is a great help to the awakening of spirituality. Satsangatve nisangatvam. Nisangatve nirmohatam nirmohatve jivan mukti. Shankara said. It can very well be inferred that owing to his good luck, it happened so in the case of Mathur also. The more he began to observe day after day the actions and behavior of the master, the more was the mood of devotion in him awakened without his knowledge. Unconsciously it grows. We find clear signs of this in his successive action. But it is certain, just one moment his mind entertained a feeling of devotion, and the next moment doubt intervened. That is the worldly nature. That Mathur's mind, like that of the worldly people, was for a long time oscillating between doubt and devotion. Before the master's seat was firmly fixed in Mathur's heart. In contrast with this, whom we will remember? Haladhari. Haladhari's mind oscillated like that, but it never came to final faith. Mathur's came because the element was there in him. Hadari was more proud of his Shastra learning. So we see that although at the outset the master's behavior, eager longing for God and so on, appeared before Mathur's eyes to be due to an excess of devotion, when they went on increasing daily, Mathur began to doubt if the master was not going out of his wits, becoming mad. But that doubt kindled kindness in him. That is another strange thing. And Mathur applied his mind to improving the master's general health and thereby curing these mental derangements and engaged a good physician for the purpose. Argumentation between the master and Mathur with his modern education, the law of nature gets altered by the will of God. A red China rose plant producing white flower. China rose means Java kusum. In Marathi, Jaswand. Mathur had a fair knowledge of English, and he acquired not a small amount of that peculiar idea of independence, namely, that he was not an insignificant man, but equal to any other. That is the result of Western education, which is the product of the Western temperament and manner of thinking. Therefore, we find Mathur trying to dissuade the master with the help of persuasion and argument from going far along the path leading to mental derangement due to an exuberance of love of God. A conversation between the master and Mathur on whether God has to obey his own laws as regards natural phenomena may be mentioned as an example of it. The master said Mathur was of the opinion. This master himself has told the disciples later. The master said Mathur was of the opinion that God has also to obey his own laws. Even he had not the power to overrule the laws he had once made. I said, what do you mean? He who makes a law can as well unmake it, if he so desire. Another. He has made it so he can do as he likes. He would by no means accept this. He said a plant producing in red flowers invariably produces red ones and never white ones, for it is his law. Well, let him, if he can, produce a white flower in a plant bearing red ones. I said he can if he wills. Do everything, including that. But he did not accept the proposition. The next day, I went to answer a call of nature towards the cluster of tamarisk trees. This is likely to be excellent to the modern reader. Nowadays, we are building Sulabh Shauchalaya for everybody. But in India, call of nature was always replied to going in a secluded place. In Bengali, what is the word? Bhaiye jacchi. Bhaiye means I am going outside. In Marathi, what is the word? Parsakade. Paras means backyard of the house. So I am going towards backyard. So in Dakshineshwar, there was a corner where tamarisk, you understand, jhau, that like peacock's feathers, the leaves are there, morpanki. In Marathi, suruचं झाड, विद्याचं झाड also they say, or morpanki. So there was a big forest cluster of trees, jhau tala. Tala means foot of them. Their master used to go. One time came when there was no jhav there. So our revered Swami Nirvanandaji requested the temple authorities to plant some jhav trees there, at least as a symbol. The next day I went to answer a call of nature toward the cluster of tamarisk trees. When I found that in two twigs of one and the same branch of a red China rose plant, there were other plants also in that, or on the way. There were two flowers, one red and the other brilliantly white, without the tiniest red spot in it, on the same branch. No sooner had I seen them that I broke the branch together with the flowers, brought it and placed it before Mathur and said, "Here you are." Mathur then said, "Yes, father, I am defeated." People will call what aberration, but it happened very next day when the conversation took place. That what to see. Coincidence. Mathur sometimes believed that physical illness produced in the master a sort of mental derangement, which manifested itself as devotional feelings in excess. Reverse. And tried by reason and argument to him that mood of the master away, to turn that mood away. Mathur was compelled daily to discuss the master's condition, because daily something unusual would happen. Thus, the worldly minded Mathur would, it is clear, spend a long time with him, thinking and discussing a great deal about his condition, partly out of curiosity, partly out of kindness, for he mistook the master's overwhelming mental condition for symptoms of a physical disease, and partly again out of wonder and devotion regarding it as an outcome of genuine divine love. So those sides are there. And how could he remain calm and free from anxiety? For the master, carried away by the current of his newly coursing divine love, would every day bring about something strange and unexpected. One day he saw a vision of the Divine Mother within himself and seated himself on the seat for worship and employed all the articles of worship in his own honor. The previous day he had performed Arati of the Universal Mother continuously for 3 long hours and made the officers of the temple restless. And the day before, he had rolled on the ground and rubbing his face against the dust on the earth at not having realized God, had wept so piteously that people gathered round him. How many indeed are these stories connected with different events of the life on different days that we heard from the Master. Thakur himself has told this afterwards. Mathur and the Master's recital of the Mahimna Stotra and his Bhava Samadhi, important event. One day the master entered a Shiva temple. There are 12 Shiva temples in Dakshineshwar, 6 on each side of the entrance ghat. One day the footnote gives that there are 12 Shiva temples facing the courtyard of the Kali temple and Dakshineshwar. That means back to the Ganges, facing the courtyard. After courtyard is Vishnu Mandir and Kali Mandir. One day the master entered a Shiva temple and began to recite the hymn on the glory of Shiva called Mahimna Stotra. In the course of his recital, when he came gradually to the following verse, he was immediately beside himself with an ecstatic mood. He could enter the spirit every time. Ne? Asitagiri samam syat kajjalam sindhu patre surataruvar shakha lekhani patra murvi likhati yadi gruhitva sarada sarvakalam tadapitava gunanam ishaparam nayati. O Lord, if the blue mountain be the ink, the ocean the ink pot, the biggest branch of the heavenly tree be the pen, the earth the writing leaf, and taking these, if the goddess of learning writes for eternity, even then the limit of thy virtues will not be reached. दिन भर कसीने आती बोलती है, गले को स्ट्रांग बनाना पड़ेगा कुछ. Reciting the above verse, the master was completely beside himself with the intense feeling in his heart of the glory of Shiva. Forgot the hymn, the language of the hymn, the recitation of the verses in their order, and all other things, and cried out loudly, saying again and again, O great God, how can I express your glory? And tears flowed profusely from his eyes down the cheeks. His cheeks, breast and clothes. Thakur's everything was too acute. That is the main thing. To the floor, which got wet. The servants and officers of the temple came there running from all sides at that noise produced by weeping, the half-uttered words in a choked voice as of a madman, and that extraordinary behavior. When they saw him in that state, some were surprised and waited to see what would happen next, saying, "Oh, it is the madness of the junior Bhattacharya," said one. I took it to be something else. I see it is very much an excess today. Will he not, said another, ride on the shoulder of Shiva? What do you say? It is better to pull him away by the hand, and so forth. And it is needless to say that there was much merriment over it too. Something mad people enjoy. But the master had no consciousness of the external world at all. Merged in the feeling of the glory of Shiva, his mind had then gone up very high beyond the external world, where the tented ideas and words of the world never reach. How could therefore the words of derision or fun expressing their thoughts reach his ears? So the words do not reach there when the consciousness is different. At that time, Mathur Babu was at the Kali temple. Kali temple. Hearing that uproar in connection with the Bhattacharya, he came there immediately. The officers hastened respectfully to make way for him. Mathur Babu came and saw the master in that mood and was at once charmed with it. When someone of the officers suggested that the master should forcibly be removed from the place where he was, that is near Shiva, he was very much annoyed and said, "Leave him alone. Let him who has a head to spare go and touch him." Head to spare, that means I will cut one head. Spare, go and touch the Bhattacharya now. The officers were therefore frightened and dared not say or do anything. A little afterward, the master regained the consciousness of the outer world, and seeing Mathur Babu standing there with the officers of the temple, he looked afraid like a boy and asked him, "Did I happen to do something wrong when I had no control over myself?" Mathur saluted him and said, "No, father, you were reciting a hymn. I stood here lest someone should disturb you unthinkingly." So that raised the Mathur's mind. An example of how others could easily have spiritual progress in the company of the master. So it was not only about Mathur. This infectious state of bhakti in company of the master is describing. Whoever has some seed, that will go. Recalling his condition at the time of sadhana, one day the master said to us, those who used to come here at that time had the idea of God kindled very soon in the company of here. That means himself. Two youths used to come from Baranagar. They were low by birth, maybe Kaivarta or Tamli. Kaivarta is fishermen. Tamli is those who prepare pan bida. They are Tamlis. Beetle nut. Beetle leaves. They were very good. They had great love and reverence for here and used to come very often. One day I was sitting with them under the Panchavati when a certain state came on one of them. I saw that his breast grew red, eyes deep red. Streams of tears were rolling down. He could neither speak nor stand. He was just like one who had drunk 2 bottles of wine. That mood of his was in no way coming to an end. I was then afraid and said to the mother, what have you done to him, mother? People will say, I have done something and brought about that condition in him. He has his father and others. He will have to go home just now. I passed my hand over his chest while I was saying so to mother. He then became somewhat calm and went home a little after. So understood what is mother? Mother is Thakur's own reality. He was telling this to mother and passing his hand over his chest. And that touch calmed him down. Mathur's vision of Shiva and Shakti at the same time in the mouth. Oh, that event has come here. That is the climax of Mathur's experience about Thakur, after which he could never entertain any doubt. We have heard from the holy mouth of the Master that at one time in his infectious company, Mathur also got into a wonderful state. This happens only when your consciousness is raised, Divyam Tadamite Chakshum. And his reverence and devotion increased 1,000-fold. 1,000 is always represents infinity. Always indrawn and informed with the spiritual mood and oblivious of surrounding, the master one day was pacing up and down the veranda, extending east to west to the northeast of his, you have to visualize this, northeast of his room, those who have not seen the Dakshineshwar. There is a wall, courtyard. Within that, Kali temple and all these things are there. And near that is Thakur's room. And that is northern side of the that courtyard. And between Thakur's room and that wall, there is a veranda. So, understood that position. And in that veranda, Thakur was walking to and fro. And that could be seen from the Babu's Kutia. There is a separate building called Babu's Kutia where the Rani or Mathur, when they came, they used to live. So from there, Thakur could be seen. Mathur was then sitting by himself in one of the rooms of the separate house which stood between the temple and the Panchavati and which is even now called the Babu's mansion. Outside that courtyard immediately. The place where the master was pacing was within an easy range of vision from where Mathur was sitting. Mathur was therefore sometimes observing him walking in an indrawn mood and thinking of him and sometimes speculating on the future trend of his own worldly affairs. The master was not at all conscious of the fact that Mathur was sitting in the parlor observing him that way from time to time. And what would it have mattered even if you were conscious of it. The disparity between the domestic, social, and other conditions of the two was so great that there was no cause for either of them feeling any concern for the other. Rather, it would have been reasonable for the master to feel hesitant and move away from the place had he known the Mathur's presence there and not been merged in that divine mood. But in that divine mood, he was not aware of the Mathur's presence, which had made him inattentive. For how could the master, who was an ordinary, insignificant, poor temple priest, whom people knew to be foolish and mad, paying little heed to ritualistic formalities, and a butt of all ridicule, help feeling hesitant in the presence of Mathur, who was a wealthy, respectable, learned, and intelligent Babuin gentleman, who might well be regarded as the proprietor of the temple and the whole estate of the Rani, that he happened to view the master with a public mind discussion, Saradananda Swami. That he happened to view the master with a benevolent eye was the only reason why the latter had not so far been driven away from the temple. But the event turned out to be something unthinkable and incomprehensible. For Mathur himself ran up in a great flurry to the master, bowed down to him, clasped with his hands both the feet of the master, and started weeping. The master said, I asked, what is this you are doing? You are a Babu, the son-in-law of the Rani. What will people think if they see you act like this? Be calm and get up. But did he give ear to it? Afterwards, when he became collected, he narrated everything without any reserve. He had had a strange vision. He said, Father, you were walking. He used to address Thakur always as Father, Baba. A sannyasi is generally addressed like that. But Thakur, Master, due to his devotion, used to address him like that. He said, Father, you were walking, and I saw distinctly that it was not you, but my mother in the temple over there, as you were coming forward in this direction. And that it was Mahadeva himself immediately when you turned about. I thought at first that it was an optical illusion. I rubbed my eyes well and looked, but saw the same thing. This happened as often as I looked. He repeatedly said this and wept. I said, why? As a matter of fact, I know nothing. Thakur was not deliberately doing something, but would he listen? I was afraid lest someone should come to know of it and tell the Rani of it. What would she think? She might perhaps say that I put a spell on him. He became calm when I consoled him in various ways. Was it for nothing that Mathur did so much for me and loved me so much? Mother gave him many visions and experiences about here. So one representative has explained. Mother gave him many visions and experiences about here. It was in fact written in Mathur's horoscope that his chosen ideal, the Divine Mother, would be so very compassionate on him that she would assume a body, accompany and protect him wherever he went. That is in his Janma Patrika. The result of this vision. Henceforward, Mathur's faith became very firm, for it was for the first time that he got an indication that the master was surely not an ordinary man. Not devotion, excess devotion, but he is God himself, both Shiva and Kali. that the master, towards whom he was attracted at first sight, and whose mental attitudes he could very often detect and understand, though others condemned him without understanding, was no other than the mother of the universe herself, who out of compassion for him was residing in his body. Mother and Shiva. It was from this time on that he believed that the one present in the stone image in the temple had perhaps assumed a body and was accompanying him wherever he went, as it was written in his horoscope. He knew what is written in his horoscope. From now on, Mathur's relation with the master became especially intimate. The evidence of the scriptures regarding Mathur's great good fortune. A great good fortune indeed smiled on Mathur. The scriptures say that not only ordinary people, but even those who have become liberated in life cannot but experience the result of actions of both kinds, good and bad, as long as their bodies last. Is it so? No. Bengali says something different. Karma korite haive. Experiencing the result is wrong. That result will go to others. That is the main thing in the para. Now body is there. So some karma will be done. And no karma is perfect, we know that. So some good, some bad karma will be there. But he will not bear the fruit at all because of no I in him. But karma will have a result. So where will that fruit go? About that, the scriptures have told something. So this translation has to be changed here. Mhm. What to be done here? The scripture says that not only ordinary people, but even those who have become liberated in life cannot but do, cannot but perform action, not experience the result of action. Okay? Good and bad, as long as their body is last. Ordinary men experience the results of their good and bad action themselves. Now, who experiences the results of the good and bad actions done through the body of the liberated? So here we see the change. No? For the liberated ones cannot do it, inasmuch as the pride and egoism in them, which experience pleasure and pain, have forever been completely burnt. Pride and egoism. Abhiman Ahankar. Translation is not happy. Abhiman hyphen Ahankar. What is Abhiman? Tell me. Thinking I consciousness about body. That is called Abhiman. Body or mind, what in Vedanta is called Upadhi, is not our real nature. But in my mind, that is my nature. That is called Abhiman. And that generates an ego. Not egotism or pride or anything. No. And this body is the source of ego in me. Ego again is, therefore, egoism and egotism are different things. It is not excess ego, but the very feeling of I consciousness comes because of my identification in the body. So this translation is not happy here. I am not at all disrespecting the translator, because it is very difficult to translate Bengali into English. And he was not alive when it was published. Jagdanji passed away before the translation could be published. So we may assume that he had no time to revise or to see his own translation. Anyway, the pride and egoism in them, here we are changing. The identification with the body and resultant ego, resultant I consciousness. Which experience pleasure and pain. I consciousness only experiences pleasure and pain. Have forever been completely burned. Who then does it if they do not experience? You understand this talk of Prarabdha one day, we read that already. Vivek Shankara is totally negated for a man of full knowledge. We read that now one day. No, it was in Brother class. The Jnana Nishtha has Prarabdha. A man of full knowledge has no Prarabdha. Or his body may have Prarabdha, but it is his will whether he likes it or not, he can discard it. Shankara has very clearly argued this in Vivek Chudamani. So but the work has a fruit, that is definite. So if he does not experience, who experiences? That is the question. The results of actions again are inevitable, and some good and bad actions cannot but be performed by the bodies of persons liberated in life till those bodies fall like dry leaves from trees. The scriptures say that those unliberated persons who serve and love the liberated ones enjoy the results of good actions of the latter, and those who hate them suffer the results of their bad actions done through their bodies. Clearly mentioned in the scriptures. Quotation is given. Shankar's commentary on Vedanta Sutras, third chapter, third section, Sutra 26 and 27. The translation of that is, similarly, there is the reading in the Shatyayani recension. His sons come by the patrimony. That means suppose he has some physical property, that will go to his son. His sons come by the patrimony, friends the result of his good actions, and foes those of his bad actions. Again, similarly, the Kaushitaki read, there are two different branches of Vedas, so different readings. Again, the Kaushitaki read, understood Shatyayani and Kaushitaki, there are two branches of that Veda, so different readings are there. Similarly, the Kaushitaki read, he, the man of knowledge, when dead, shakes off the results of his good and bad actions by the strength of his knowledge. His dear natais, relatives, enjoys the result of his good actions and haters those of his bad actions. Okay? So this is Mathur Salak. Because he was helping him, loving him, so all the good results are going. He never felt enmity. Even when he misunderstood, he felt kindness and wanted to help him always. Who can say how great is the result of the loving devotional service rendered to the incarnate? This are all Jivan Muktas. Who can say how great is the result of the loving devotional service rendered to the incarnations of God when great results are attained through the service of even ordinary liberated people? Om Sarvadharma Sthapakastam Sarvadharma Swarupakah Acharyanam Acharyo Ramakrishna Te Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.